Good morning.
Hello, hello.
Hey, thanks for letting us know. I know that who's logging in from the iPhone? Yeah, you can enter your response in the chat. Now we're waiting on Goshu and hi Goshu. Okay, so there's Suvanal. I know that I received an email from KD sharing his input because he's not going to be able to join us. And I think we're waiting on Kaponka. So thank you all. Thank you to, especially to Vince and Dana for agreeing to meet with the department faculty. I know that a couple of weeks ago, I had, may have been 2.5 weeks ago. Time is just, yeah. No worries, Goshu. Flying by. So I do have the document where I did take notes based on the input from the department faculty and specifically around the key components of the job. So I'm going to get my other computer. Because part of what I'm going to be doing in terms of my objective for today is for Dana and Vince as the other members of obviously the search committee to be able to share their input, for you all to also be able to share your input with them. And so that we can come to a consensus in terms of how we move forward with writing a memo that comes from the search committee itself. So the update also that I have to share is that at this point, the only candidate who's in the search is Mayo Boniface. Now I know that when we met some time ago, that was the top choice of the ethics studies faculty member who weighed in, who voted. And at this point, the second finalist, Stacy Salinas, has formally withdrawn her application from the final search. So again, this is really about how can we come together and share input with one another, and especially with Dana and Vince having an opportunity to do that so that, we can figure out how to move forward. So what I'm going to do is really primarily listen, take notes. I know that with the final memo from the search committee, which I had done this with the first memo that I sent, and I'm going to share the document where I took notes from the first meeting, and I'll be taking notes from this meeting, and where there's a breakdown of the, the key components of the job based on the job description that obviously also align with the ethnic studies elaborations. And I'm going to turn it over to Dana or Vince, whoever would like to start first. And I guess I don't want to make any assumptions. So obviously the last thing I think that anyone wants, including the dean, is a failed search. To to the document. So I'm entering the link in the chat. So I think it's, if I'm understanding correctly, Dana, it's like more so discussing and figuring out how to get on the same page in terms of not only how to move forward with the full search committee and the ethnic studies department faculty, but also that we do have to, send a final memo that's representing the search committee to the dean. And so what that will look like. What I would like to do is just really allot however much time you all would like to have the conversation, and I'll take notes. And I'm really working on not rushing the process, because whenever I rush something, I just think it tends to be, that's when things get sloppy, and we can really important elements of whatever it is can fall through the cracks. So what I would like to do, Dana and Vince, is then when the next time you're available, schedule another meeting so that, like I said, I'll be primarily taking notes, but schedule a meeting where we can take all of this input, and then where we can draft a final memo that then all three of us can sign off on. So I don't know if that's accurate, if that makes sense. Okay, so I guess what I'll do, so based on, I'll just share my screen quickly. So this is the document where I'm going to be taking notes, and where I took notes before. This is kind of a table that we kind of, I started to create. These are and again, I have the job description. I'm working between two different computers. So I'll make sure that I specifically pull out the language of the job description itself based on that describes the key components of the position. So yeah, I'm already pretty familiar. So these are the key components. Obviously, I think what gets tricky in the past, we posted job positions that were framed as ethnic studies with an emphasis in a given subfield of ethnic studies, and we just weren't getting a wide pool of candidates applying. So the emphasis has tended to be more, in the actual areas of the subfields, like someone who teaches Black studies, but it's both, right? Ethnic studies, right? And with an emphasis and in this case, Asian American studies. So obviously looking at the scholarship, the education, teaching is huge. I mean, this is huge with our hiring process, and it has been even since I was hired. So program building, and not only in terms of our events, which are really integral and really critical, but also in constantly revamping and updating our curriculum, as well as this position would not call for this person to lead the coordination of the Ethnic Studies Master's program, or obviously of the professional certificate program, because we're getting ready to launch that, but like being able to support that, and especially with events, having someone who's really seasoned and who has, in terms of program building based on their professional experience, their experience in academia as well. And then I kind of broke out event coordination, but that goes into program building. And then obviously community-based engagement is huge. That goes beyond conceptualizing community as being the university community, going out into the larger communities, and going beyond research or scholarship. So these are kind of the key components. And so in this meeting, I was specifically taking notes after I heard from the faculty on who they had selected as their top candidate. So I guess Dana and Vince, I'm not sure in terms of what are you all thinking as the search committee? In terms of how to move forward. I know that for me on the search committee, I would like for us to just figure out how we can take the input from, this prior meeting and today and draft a memo, obviously, supporting Mayo as the candidate moving forward and in a way that, you all can sign off on and that you all can feel confident in. So I'm not sure, but again, I don't know if that's how you see the purpose of this meeting or in terms of consensus building.
Okay, so for me, when Mary invited me to be part of the job search, happy to oblige. I really want, what's best for your department. I know I'm not in that department, but I was happy to serve. And when we went through all the applications and we did the Zoom interviews, we did identify 3 candidates that were suitable. And to expedite the process, I think we narrowed that down to 2. And so our top choices were Mayo and Stacey Ann. Both Mayo and Stacey Ann were high on my list, so they would have been my top 2 out of the 3. And I thought Mayo had the best Zoom presentation, and it was encouraging that she was already in the ethnic studies department teaching for our students. So when it comes down to the campus visit, this is how my impressions are made. So I didn't know Mayo before the campus visit. I did welcome both Mayo and Stacey Ann when they came, and I did attend both of their research presentations and both of their teaching presentations, and that's all of my interaction. That's all I know of both of them. And so, Mayo with her teaching demonstration, I felt like and there were some opportunities to connect with the students, but I think she may have been a little bit thrown off by the technical difficulties that she experienced at the beginning of her teaching demonstration, in which she was going to show like 2 different videos. I think one was 10 minutes and the other was 6 minutes. And instead, she gave pretty much a historical outline of the Asian American movement. And I thought that worked out better. But still, with the Q&A portion, it was a bit disjointed in terms of trying to figure out. I think she had good questions at the end, but was struggling to engage the students. Maybe if she would had them in like think pair shares or small groups, they could have maybe thought about the questions more. But instead, I think it was more of a lecture style, which is very similar to Stacey Ann. They both had lecture style presentations, but at least Mayo had the Q&A portion where students did give their thoughts. I actually thought Stacey Ann's presentation content-wise was more interesting because she was discussing an innovative way to look at the Asian American movement and queering the Asian American movement. But again, it wasn't much of a teaching demonstration. It was more of a job talk, almost like a second research presentation. But it was well articulated, well researched, and very interesting. But students weren't quite as engaged as I would have hoped in Stacey Ann's teaching demonstration either. So where I saw to maybe differentiate between the 2 candidates was with their job talks. And that's where I felt that Stacey Ann was stronger than Mayo. I felt like Stacey Ann's research, spoke to issues of Filipinx communities in the Central Valley with the job talk on Talk Stories, and she discussed the difficulty of actually bridging some of the community issues in the Filipinx community in the Central Valley. Ranging from the Filipino American National Historical Society in Stockton, which is called FONS, and then the FONS in Central Valley Stacey was very aware of, some of the issues and some of the polarities going on with, those groups. And I think she was, poised to be a pretty good bridge. And so she's had that kind of community work alongside her efforts with creating the original archive and working with the Stockton Museum and with the Bullistone Center. So it was a kind of scholar activism, that may look different from Mayo, who comes with, more experience teaching than Stacey, who's teaching as a graduate instructor mostly, and Mayo teaching formally at USF, obviously, and she has her own experience with community advocacy. What was problematic about Mayo's job talk was I didn't think it sufficiently presented her research agenda, the research findings, and connecting it to the Central Valley closely. I think there were some missed opportunities there, and she did try to create this way of presenting her job talk, infusing hip hop and music. But in the end, I felt like it took up a lot of time. It took about 25 minutes and then she skipped over a couple of sections in between of what she described as like a 4-part mixtape. She talked about part 1 and part 4, and then parts 2 and 3 were missing. And so I wasn't exactly sure where she was going to go with parts 2 and 3. And so I had to ask questions at the end, how the research would contribute to like a canon in Asian American studies or in intersectionality, since she did have experience teaching intersectionality theory at USF. But again, kind of like the focus on evidence and findings was lacking for me. And so for that reason, I thought the job talk was insufficient for Mayo, and that made me think of Stacey and a lot harder, and the scales kind of tipped in favor of Stacey and on the strength of that job talk. So with that, I just want to know if you had any questions, because I know you all largely had voted for Mayo, and now you're hearing this information, and if there's any other questions you might have to make a better informed decision, because Mayo is the candidate right now. I mean, Stacey Ann is out, but we want to make sure that we come to an agreement that, okay, this is the person that you want. So any questions you have for me or Dana? Or Dana, you can go ahead and give your thoughts.
Yeah. I guess I mean, and I'll follow whoever wants to take the lead on this, but it may make more sense to sort of share all of the kind of search committee thoughts, and then go to questions. So I will say this, that I think it's kind of funny. I think all three of us came to slightly different conclusions about candidates after the talk. So obviously with Mary kind of being in favor of Mayo's candidacy, Vince being much more strongly in favor of Stacey Ann's candidacy. And I will say that for me, I was underwhelmed by both of the candidates. I don't know that, and I'm not necessarily upset that those are the people we brought to campus or whatever, right? But I just was expecting and hoping for more from both of them. And I think that in different ways, in many ways, reflecting sort of what Vince had said about the candidates, just didn't quite feel excited about either of them. But if I had to choose one, and I think I told the search committee, I was like, gun to my head, I would probably have to give Stacey Ann the slight edge, again, largely for similar reasons that Vince had outlined. But I'll add a little bit to what Vince was saying, and I'll sort of leave Stacey Ann out of this for the time being, because I think at this point what we are trying to do is evaluate Mayo on the merits of Mayo and the job, because Stacey Ann is not a contender at this point. And so my approach to the search committee is really much more about what's the expertise, right, that we, particularly Vince and I, are bringing to this. Why were we asked to be part of the committee, which is really to provide the expertise in Asian American studies specifically, which both Vince and I are formally trained, even though our PhD work is in sociology. Both of us hold master's degrees and graduate certificates in Asian American studies. And so my issue with the job talk and sort of the way that Mayo, even in the answers to the questions in her documents, provides just insight into the research, right, that she has conducted in the past, really left me wondering where the Asian American studies was in it, because my understanding of Mayo's work up to this point has really been around indigenous water sovereignty rights issues and sort of comparative study, right, between what was happening with the Omaha people in Nebraska and indigenous communities in the Philippines. And I am 100% in favor of this research, broadly speaking, that I think it's really important. I think it's really interesting and innovative to think about these things in the frames that she is doing. But what is missing for me is sort of the Asian American studies in that, right? Because to me, that speaks more to a broader indigenous studies versus what Asian American studies is thinking about. And that's not to say that Asian American studies is not thinking about indigeneity in particular ways, but it is not in that way, right? Because as we're thinking about this, there is to talk about Native Americans and then to talk about indigenous Filipinos in the Philippines, right? There is no Asian American in that. And so that was sort of the issue, right? And for me, it's also that it would also be a different story if perhaps we had other Asian American studies faculty in the department, right? And that we were now talking about how do we augment the ethnic studies program broadly? How do we think about the crossovers, right, between the different sub areas of ethnic studies, which I do think that Mayo offers really great insight into. But because this is the one Asian American studies position that the department will have, and given sort of budgetary cliffs that we may be going off of soon, right, maybe the only Asian American studies faculty that the department has for a really long time, right? Maybe not a real long time, but for a period of time. And so that's one of the things that was weighing on me. And then the other thing that I will say, though, is weighing on me, right, and that this is where Vince and I do not have, right, expertise, is with the department itself, right? Because as Vince mentioned, like, we are very well aware that we are not members of your department, and that your department does and should have, right, autonomy and self-determination in terms of what direction you guys see, right? And I have been very cognizant and thinking about, right, even the optics of external actors coming in and trying to dictate, right, what ethnic studies as a department should do in terms of how they want to progress as a department, right? And so I mean, that goes, for Vince and myself as outside members on the search committee, but also in terms of the dean, the associate dean, the provost, other actors within the university, right? So, so I am cognizant of that, and that was part of the reason why I really wanted to take the opportunity to have this meeting with folks from the department, because, as Mary was saying, I, at this point in time, am trying to figure out, right, this is my perspective, again, as somebody who is immersed in Asian American studies, right? In fact, I was just at the Asian American Studies conference last week, and saw, and not that, again, not that this matters, but Stacey Ann was at that conference. She is very much immersed, right, right within that discipline. I'm not sure, at least, and based on her CV, that Mayo has attended that conference, which is the conference, right, for Asian American Studies, if you are part of that discipline. Not that conference participation is the be all end all of all of this, but yeah. So I think I do want to just offer that, right, that, like, from an Asian American Studies perspective, that's what's missing for me, and that was why the candidacy was difficult to support. And it had less to do, because, I have a lot of forgiveness in terms of people developing their teaching skills. So even if maybe the style that Mayo was presenting to us didn't seem to jive with what we thought we at Stan State do, or what you guys in ethnic studies do, or what we in sociology do, right, with our classes, that there's space for growth there, and that's fine. But, if we're talking about an Asian American studies or an Asian Americanist in the ethnic studies department, what is it that we are trying to develop within that sub area here? And that's so that's basically where I'm at. And so what I would really love to hear from the faculty in the department, right, is the rationale for the broader support for Mayo's candidacy. And, you know, I would like to think that I am persuadable at this moment, right? Because I do think I want to think really seriously about, you know, the fact that we only have one candidate still in the mix here, and, you know, what the implications are of a failed search at this point in time. I will say that in my conversations with the dean, and Mary, I don't know if you've had these conversations as well, that he told me that this line is not in danger of going away. So that if it was a failed search, that he said that this line would continue to be open next year. So that's what he told me.
Thank you for sharing that, Dana. So I was told the exact opposite by the provost and the dean. And the provost, so this was back in the fall when I had, you know, received the resignation notice and everything. And I met with them as soon as I could. And especially from the provost, it was like, you've got to hurry, because there is no guarantee that even, and then, you know, the dean concurred, the provost was like, there's no guarantee that if you don't get this position into Curriculog and get it approved, that you will even have that option even during this academic calendar year. And so I'm very, very concerned. That's why there was so much rush. And then the dean was really pushing in the meeting that we had, after the meeting that I had with the provost and the dean in the fall. He immediately from the outset said that pushed for there to be two outside members. And so, and he suggested you, Dana, and then someone else. And so then I had to scramble. So and he was like he pushed for me. He really pushed for me and said that really the only option that I had was to create a search committee with myself and two outside members. And so, you know, the fact that we're even able to have this discussion is really in large part because of you and Vince, because if you all had not agreed to serve on the committee, then I mean, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened.
Well, I will just say that conversation was 2 weeks ago now. Well, actually, no, maybe less than that, because it was right after spring break that the dean told me that the line was open. So I mean, you know, granted, he can say a lot of things. There are no guarantees in life and all of that. And I get that, but, you know, but it may be worth a more direct conversation with both him and the provost at this point in time, because I just think that it gives us, not us, but well, us and you all, right, a sense of like, what are the possibilities? Are we sort of in a situation where we could go many years without any Asian American Studies faculty member? And that also may weigh in on the decision.
Right. Yeah, because it's such a chronic, I know just, I'm gonna, because I also, as the ethnic studies elder faculty member, like literally, and also because of how long I've been here and all of these search committees, there is, we have really struggled to retain someone in this position. And so again, that's why the job descriptions are written the way they are. That's why in addition to the training, obviously the scholarship and the teaching, there's also these other components. And to provide a little bit more context, understanding that ethnic studies, right, is an interdisciplinary discipline or field. And I think part of like what I'm hearing is what the kind of the ethnic studies framework as an interdisciplinary field and having quite a bit of range there, which was the case with me, as well as how to balance out the emphasis in Asian American studies within the larger context of ethnic studies and what really fits and supplements the department. I know for myself that my main training in ethnic studies was because I had transferable skills in terms of having taught it as a bi-departmental appointment in anthropology and ethnic studies in Arizona. In terms of my actual background, my research, it was very specific, like anthropology of education. It was intersectional in a number of ways. And it wasn't technically Black studies, right? So there was a built-in knowing that going to the conferences and really, which I was able to do as a scholar, right, is able to really get up to speed on immersing myself in the literature, especially through publications with Black feminism, Black womanisms. And so that is kind of a built-in caveat, I would say, with how we conduct searches for ethnic studies faculty. And the other key issue about the reason why we would like ideally to have 2 faculty members per emphasis area is, like, I was brought in as someone who, you know, based on my the transferability of my training, of my teaching, where my emphasis was much more so, and obviously US-based Black studies, knowing that primarily ethnic studies is a field, right, that's primarily US-based. And at the same time, getting that kind of broad, having that more diasporic, which to me, I think what the term is with Asian American studies is kind of AIDA, or Asian American Pacific Islander diasporic Asian, right, kind of context. But then bringing in Goshu as someone who's very much, the emphasis is in more of a Pan-African or Africana studies focus. And then with Indigenous studies, even starting out with someone like Waponka, who was much more Latinx indigeneity versus US based. So it's, you know, so we haven't prioritized the ethnic studies faculty member we bring in based on a given subfield, based on whether the emphasis is much more specifically US based or more diasporic based. So I will give that context, and then I'm going to, so I can schedule, to just get more information. I just know that when I met with the provost and the dean in fall, they were very, very, very adamant. And it actually caused me to feel very nervous. So, but yeah, so that's good to hear. So I'm gonna stop there, like you said. And anyone, Huvanal or Goshu, I know Goshu, you hosted Mayo's teaching demonstration. You were also able to attend Stacy's job talk. So I don't know if you, and Viv, right, as an alumni, ethnic studies major, attended, I think primarily, well, I don't know, with just some portions, but I don't know, Goshu, if you would like to have questions or share the input you provided when we met as a department, or, you know, and also or add on to the input that you provided.
Hello, yeah. Thank you. I just, while I couldn't attend all the presentations, obviously I attended Stacy's research talk and Mayo's teaching demo. So although I couldn't attend all the presentation, I did engage with both Stacy and Mayo in a way to some extent. So from my limited interaction, I found the first presentation was Stacy's, I guess. I found Stacy to be particularly impressive in her ability to articulate, the feminist ideas, and I was interested in the way she demonstrated, her community engagement activities. I thought her theoretical and conceptual skills were also amazing. On the other hand, Mayo, I think, showcased her strengths in contextualizing Asian American studies with ethnic studies. Particularly her teaching style was relevant to, I think, at the time, our discussions, and despite being a little bit of kind of lecture based, I think she managed to keep the students engaged. And later on, students also mentioned to me that it was engaging and they enjoyed her class. So while I can only comment based on my limited engagement, which is on Stacy's research presentation and Mayo's teaching demonstration, I think I must say that I found both were fascinating and attended the event with great interest. I think that's what I could say.
And I think, Goshu, think of like listening to what Dana said in terms of, so right now it really seems like, with the majority of the search committee, the two options right now, because Mayo is the only candidate, is that we would move forward with Mayo, right, with the offer to join the ethnic studies faculty, or it would be a failed search. So out of those two options, where do you fall out of those two options?
I think I would go for Mayo being selected in my view. I wouldn't have like the full understanding, because to be able to judge, at least, I think I must attend both their teaching demos just to make my point. But I worked in my limited engagement with her. I thought what she presented was very relevant. And it's particularly for me, looking at the students after her presentation, they seemed very motivated and engaged. And just as a follow-up question, the following class, I asked them their thoughts about the course, and they found it interesting. And so, just listening to that feedback, I would go with Mayo being selected, as for me, just personally, other than considering that as a failed search. But obviously it's up to the committee to make that decision.
Yeah, and I know I did receive another email from KD, and and this gets tricky because I don't know to what degree, because in terms of these searches, I know that the search committee in particular, we have to assess both candidates based on the application materials, which, right, cannot be shared, and then also with the interviews. And it's very common practice at Stan State for folks who are already, for example, lecturers, adjunct faculty in departments. I've been meeting them since, right, I came here in 2018, who get hired as tenure track faculty. So no, but so that's, and at the same time, I really worked very hard to be very cognizant of knowing that even with that being the case, of really being open to whoever I thought was going to be the best fit overall, right, for ethnic studies in this position with an emphasis in Asian American studies. So I know it gets tricky if there are interactions in other ways. That always gives a candidate a benefit. So and so I appreciate, right, the way that you are framing this in terms of, what you saw, what you were able to observe. And again, with KD and Poponka, KD sent, again, his input is to select Mayo. And he also, I just copy and pasted his email on the document. And if the search committee would like anything in writing from him, he actually offered that. He volunteered that. I didn't, wasn't gonna ask anyone to submit anything in writing. And I can do that, if that would also help to provide fuller feedback from, right, the ethnic studies faculty. So, and Juvenal, I know that like you had abstained, right, because for those reasons, because you were only able to attend a portion of the debriefing session.
Yes,
So
I just want to share with Vincent and Dana, the only reason I didn't show up to any of the events was because I had health appointments that I had been needing to get for a while. And I'll be honest with you, after I went to like therapy a few times, I passed out and I didn't wake up. And so those were, again, I prioritized my health, and it just happened, coincided with that week. But anyhow, I will say that what was very clear to me was that, you know, on the one hand, and I only met Mayo, and I went to, and again, I showed up because of another meeting. I went towards the end of her talk, and what was strong about her was her, what I perceived was her teaching and her relations with the community, her work with the community. That was really strong. Versus Stacy, I didn't meet her, but again, her understanding of the field, the research aspect to her was very strong. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's why I abstained for those reasons. Had I attended, then I would have for sure voted. But that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, it's just a reminder, this was the first time that we had an in-person process in years. I mean, we've had several, the last time we had an in-person search for tenure track faculty or full-time lecturers, because since then that was for, job searches, but it was 2019. And so an oversight of mine was setting it up. So even just like logging into, I'm not sure how I would have done it, but because we didn't do this when we had the in-person searches, is recording, recording, knowing what we know, the hybrid format from fully in person to fully online job searches, where we did record the teaching demos, we did record the job talks, and we made the recordings available, to whoever requested them. And so, which is not a practice that we were implementing before COVID. So the best of both worlds would have been to record the job talk, the job talks and the teaching demos for anyone to be able to view those. So that's a huge, that's duly noted moving forward. And so I guess, and still, I think it's still based on what you were able, and I guess this is a larger question of both seeing the strengths of the candidates and also in terms of all of the components of the job talk. That's why I'm going to go back and I'm going to copy and paste the components in addition to the teaching, obviously the scholarship, understanding how fundamental that is, and also with how we have been conducting ethnic studies searches, largely because of the marginalization of ethnic studies still as a field, knowing that there are not that many PhDs, knowing that because there are not that many doctoral programs in comparison to other kinds of terminal degrees, the notion of interdisciplinary ethnic studies scholars, that's something that we're always playing with. And so I think it's also important to look at, obviously, go back to the job description, and the dean calls for this, and really breaking out those different components. So having said all of that, so now it's like the question is now, again, if you with your limited interaction to know, but not being able to participate in the final campus visits, the bigger question of if the choice is between a failed search or choosing Mayo, who is the only candidate at this point, what would you choose? Even, right? So, Hubin.
Can I say, so like Dana, if I had a gun pointed in my head and knowing what I know now, here at CSC Stan, and I'll be frank with y'all, when I came to CSC Stan, I had other offers for R1s. I had 5 other offers. I chose Stan State because of the department, because of the people in the department. And so knowing what I know now, if I had to give the edge out and knowing the type of work that we do here, I would give it to Maya personally, and my scholarship wise, because I know what it takes to get to, and I'll be frank with you, like for me, it's about getting dirty to reach our students, down and dirty to reach our students. on an educational level, on a theoretical level, on a community level. And so for me, if I had to choose one who I'm gonna do this work with, I would choose Mayo from what I know. But again, that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank y'all. So yeah, it's so
Can I ask, and just to give a little bit more,
yes,
guess,
yeah,
context
so now, yeah,
first?
Dana and Vince, please go, feel free to respond and to ask.
Thanks, Mary. So, when we're talking about failed search, and again, I think this is would be good for us to verify with both the dean and the provost in terms of budget for next year, because I guess the question is, when it comes to failed search, right? For me, that is highly dependent on whether or not we get to start this search again. And by we, I mean you guys as a department, right? Like in the fall. And then with the opportunity, right, to bring other candidates to campus to see other candidates. There are new PhDs popping up every year, right? So there might be a different pool of candidates. And of course, Mayo would be welcome to reapply at that point in time, and perhaps maybe could even be encouraged to do so. Versus, right, because I guess, and then we're talking about like a year delay in terms of, because even, Juvenal, I really appreciate, you kind of being honest about sort of your, lack of familiarity with either candidate, right, and why you decided to abstain from the initial vote. But that is all to say that you also know the inner workings of like the workload that you all have and what the cost of that is to each of you as individuals when you are down a tenure track faculty in your department, right? And so I don't want to discount that as well. But, I guess what I'm saying here is that, like, is that something that you're willing to sort of bear for maybe one academic year in the possibility, right, of seeing other candidates? Or is that something you're like, you know what, no, we need somebody immediately. We are understaffed. We need these folks now, right? So that's the other sort of thing. And again, that is entirely dependent on what the dean and the provost say in terms of whether or not this line will be approved again in the fall. And I say that knowing already that you all are overworked. So
We're all overworked. I know you are too. So I think this is actually.
do you see this like pile of clothes behind me?
Oh my God.
I'm at the Cross Cultural Center and we're like prepping.
I love it. It's awesome.
I thought it was books.
It's close.
It makes you feel very human. That's good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I hope you're feeling better now too, Juvenal. I didn't know about your health troubles, and so I hope you're doing better. And I know that retention has been very difficult for Asian American Studies scholar in ethnic studies. I mean, we've really accepted like 3 people, like 3 years in a row, and none of them really quite panned out. So I just want you all to be comfortable in your decision. If this is like the person you want, or, if, you may want to take a risk into the unknown. Maybe uncertainty is, maybe appealing, just based on your experiences with retention, for an ethnic studies scholar, and, what you feel like you need at this point. And I think you really need a scholar that'll stick around too, and be committed to the area, to the students. And if you had any questions for me about, I mean, I've only like seen, again, the research talk and the teaching demonstration. I don't know if, Mayo in other contexts, but if you had questions, for me about, any of those interactions I've had with Mayo, just feel free to ask.
I was just wondering, has there been any other, like in your previous engagement as a search committee member, or from your kind of anecdotal experience with other faculty member who participated in search committees, when a candidate pulls out their candidacy, What does normally happen? Is it like customary to cancel the search, or usually what's been the practice? Just I'm curious.
Well, from what we've had in the past, at least with the ethnic studies searches, we've had another candidate to choose from. I think at least one other time. And I think we've avoided a failed search, like in the times that I mentioned from before with ethnic studies hires in your department now, which was a program before. I don't think we've ever done a failed search. So there usually was someone else in the pool.
Well, I was going to say the only other example of this that's a little bit different, but when we had the previous search for the Asian American Studies position prior to Chia, actually, so this was when Joselle was hired, that search, we offered that position. I don't even know if I'm technically supposed to tell you this. But
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything.
And I know that the meeting is being recorded, so I'm going to get in trouble. But that's
Sorry,
fine.
sorry if I don't.